First News with Keeler in the morning on WIBX and WIBX950.com.
Oneida County District Attorney Scott McNamara is on the line right now. Scott, good morning.
Good morning, Bill.
So, listen, I feel like you were never in doubt that this was going to be the decision out of the appellate court on Friday, that they would uphold the conviction and the sentence of Kaitlyn Conley.
We never really thought the allegations that were being pushed forth were accurate, so we never had a concern. The one thing that we were a little concerned about was the argument of ineffective assistance of counsel, only because the court has been spending a lot more time on those allegations and has overturned convictions on that where they never used to when I first started in the DA's office. But we really didn't think that was accurate neither. I mean, just a strategy that doesn't work doesn't mean it's ineffective.
Yeah.
And the strategy that Frank Policelli took made a lot of sense because that's where the colchicine was found, and that's what his client was saying, that
right.
You know, the son did it. So that was the only thing that we had a little concern about, only because the court has been looking at those type of cases more and ruling, you know, that lawyers are ineffective. But we really didn't think so, but that was the only one that gave us a little pause. The rest of the things we never really thought were an issue.
What percentage, on average, what percentage of cases are overturned?
I don't know what the actual number is. If I had a guess, I would say
less than 5%, right?
Yeah, I would say between 1% and 5%. It's generally the appellate division overturns when there's some sort of serious error in the trial that really jumps out. And like there's a case up in Syracuse that got overturned where a doctor was alleged to have killed his wife. Dr. Newlander, that case got overturned because there was an issue with a juror. It's usually something really significant, but it's not something that happens very often.
People often think when there's an appeal, like I'll use this case as an example, they think if they can just get before the appellate court and this judge, whatever the judge is, they're going to say, the panel, there's no way they're going to buy the circumstances of events, but that's almost never what's being debated. What's being debated is, was there a procedural ruling that shouldn't have been made by the original judge, right? You mentioned a juror. It doesn't seem to me anyway that these appellate judges are ever debating, do you really think she did it, or do you really think he did it? That's not what there's
not even a debate when you think about it.
No, actually, they did look at that.
Oh, really?
Case. Yeah, they do. That is a typical issue on appeal, but the standard is, what they do is they allege that the verdict was against the weight of the evidence. And the standard on appellate review is much different than proof beyond a reasonable doubt. So a lot of people think, when we get in front of this panel, you know, they're going to look at this and they're going to find reasonable doubt. They don't look at it that way. They look at it in the light most favorable to the people who won the trial. The standard is they look at it and they draw all the inferences in favor of the verdict and then say, is there any way that this shouldn't have happened?
Right.
And that's what they did in this case. And, you know, when you take all of the proof that we had, you know, if you believe it to be true, and that's kind of how they do it, they believe it to be true. And so then they say, okay, well, if this is true and this is true and this is true, then does it make sense? And it's not the same as a jury trial, though.
Well, and can you talk about that too? Because it's I have the luxury, or I guess lack thereof, of actually being in one of those proceedings in front of the appellate division, and it's when you go in, you're thinking, and like Jeff was saying, you're thinking we're going to go in, we're going to debate our case, we're going to. It is a very much a letdown. It's very formal. And almost everything is in the briefs that are submitted to the court, right?
Right. And when you argue a case on appeal, the argument really has to be made on your papers because they're not there to listen to long-winded speeches. I probably talk more right now than a normal appellate court.
Right.
Here's you just they want you to explain something if they have a question, but they really don't get into too much. I argued a case in front of our highest court against Policelli actually one time, and they have questions in mind that they want to ask you. They don't want you talking, just rambling. They want you to answer their question and then move on. Yep. And it's a very short period of time. Like you said, a lot of people are let down. I think in this case there was such attention directed towards the appeal that a lot of people watched it online, and I know a lot of people that aren't lawyers would say to me, well, what was that? That was
right.
kind of, and I said, there was more argument in that case than in most cases. Yeah. And the judges I thought one of the judges tipped his hand when he, and they sometimes do, by the way, they ask a question. He's like, I read this whole thing, and he basically said, I don't think Policelli was ineffective. He didn't say those exact words, but words to that effect. So he's one of the more liberal judges on the panel, someone that's, more in line with defendants' rights than a more conservative judge is more, pro-police. So, we felt good about that. And there was no real issue that they were really hitting on. So that made us feel good. But it was, to a lot of people that watched it, I think they were somewhat let down. It's not like a closing argument in a jury trial.
I know you have, I know this is personal for the DA's office, and but there are a lot of people that don't believe that she did it. And, and it doesn't help, too, that that storyline can be presented on programs like Dateline and everything else. This is a pretty it is a very high profile case when you think about it. But is there a like I try to figure this out in my head, and there was another option. I think we've discussed this before, that maybe the intent was not to kill. Maybe the intent was to create this world where someone is ill and then she can come in to rescue the day. But then it got out of hand, and she ultimately died. Would that have changed if? And I don't know that you could use that strategy as a defense, but if that was true, is 25 years too much?
Well, no, I don't. I mean, she killed her. I mean, it's kind of like the question: what do you do with the person that goes out to a bar and has too much to drink?
Right.
And kill somebody, an innocent person.
Right.
We're dealing with that right now. We have a case that happened in Kirkland, not this Christmas, but the Christmas before. And, what is the right punishment? I mean, that guy had done some stuff for a volunteer fire department that day, went out to Texas Roadhouse to have dinner with a friend and his wife, and then driving home to Morrisville, and now he's dead, and the wife was seriously injured. So what do you do with those people? What is the right punishment? That's the thing. And the one thing I would say about the people that don't think that she's guilty, there's two things I like to say about that. Number one, there's a Netflix series about Richard Jewell, and I remember my wife said, "Hey, let's watch this." I said, "No, he's that guy that bombed the Olympics in Atlanta." If you believe headlines,
right,
and that's all you read, you don't know the whole thing. He was, and I watched the thing. I said to my wife, I go, "I'm mortified." I go, "He wasn't even the guy,"
right?
And so
it destroyed his life in so many ways.
Keep that in mind. You can't go based upon a headline that you hear about something that happened. And the other thing is, I put the entire 2 trials of transcripts online so people can read them, because, and it's a long read, I agree, but you know what? That's what the jury heard, and that's what the real evidence is. And it has caused a lot of publicity. I know there's a book out. I mean, the book's just the opposite of Dateline. I haven't read the book, but I've heard people talk about the book. And I know there's a couple other television shows that are interested in covering it.
Yeah, one of the books says she definitely did it, and here's how we know. I think that's the book you're referring to. The other part of this is I call it the the Phil Spector effect, and that is that pretty people don't commit crimes. And
and Frank Policelli said that to one of my assistants. I mean, he said, "There's no way in the world she's going to get convicted. Young, pretty girls don't get convicted."
Yeah.
And I think that's why he felt so confident that he could deliver a victory in this case. He's right. And another thing, star athletes don't get convicted.
Right.
I mean, there are certain things that in our profession, when we see the fact pattern, we're like, oh my God, this isn't going to go well. And the flip side's true. When a politician's accused of something, they're presumed guilty right out of the gate.
Right.
You can see that with our governor right now. I mean, he doesn't. He doesn't get the benefit of he's innocent until proven guilty. It's like everyone wants him to resign, and no one's even seen a sworn statement in that case. So, it's those are unfortunately the way people think.
We'll call it the Phil Spector effect. That's because he just was not a pretty guy. So, Scott, thank you so much. Out of time, I appreciate it, and we'll talk again soon. Thank you.
All right. Have a good day.
You too.